World War game series is one of the most popular franchises in the historical market on PC. But since in the last few years it has branched out to consoles, it was time for them to go bigger than they've ever been before. First there was Verdun, then there was Tannenberg, but now we have Isonzo. When this game was initially announced, it came to such a popular fanfare. You see, whilst the World War I series of games with Verdun and Tannenberg have never been the biggest in the world, they've always had such a loyal and popular fan base. And this is just down to the market that they've tried to capture. The historical authenticity of each game really draws people in, that not only just into World War I, but history in general. And these types of games have loyal fan bases that span years and years into the future. And that's why I think Isonzo was so well received. But what is it? Well, today I'm going to be talking a bit more in depth about what the game really is trying to focus on. Of course, the new maps and game modes that we'll be receiving, hints of some of the gameplay, weapons, troops, and so on. But if anyone is unaware or new to the series, a quick recap of the first two games. Verdun was set in the French trenches, bloody, muddy, and my was it horrific. It really took what people expected Battlefield 1 to be and really push it to the next level with historical authenticity to the max. You see, Battlefield 1 was a brilliant game, but it wasn't historically authentic. It was set in World War I, but an almost alternate reality version of World War I. But moving away from the French trenches, we went to Tannenberg on the Eastern Front, with the Russians fighting through fields, forests, and of course, wooden cabins, because where else would the Russians be hiding out? A game that took it to a bigger scale. It felt much larger than the previous game in Verdun, and was way more open than anything, using less man-made trenches and more natural terrain in order to accomplish your objectives throughout the Great War. Isonzo is going even more different. It's taking a completely unique look and something that I don't think we've really seen in a World War I style game, at least not in the recent history. It takes us into the Italian Alps, the mountains, rocky, urban, and deadly. Not only will there be human enemies, human opponents, but there will also be death-defying objectives just using the terrain, having to push up small mountain paths, trying not to fall off, using cover where you can, but you see, there aren't things like trenches here. The terrain just didn't really warrant trenches in the Italian Alps, so making them was way harder, meaning that it's going to be using natural rocks, natural cover in order to move from one position to the next. We'll also be fighting more in the urban areas, being inside buildings, fighting through the streets and towns, and my, does it look absolutely gorgeous. One of the main maps that we've been showing is made up of 3 battlefields. San Michael, which was fought in 6th of August 1916, Gorizia, August 8th, 1916, and Sabatino, on of course once again the 6th of August 1916. These 3 objectives will be working in harmony, fighting on the map using the new offensive game mode, where one team defends, the other team pushes, pushing back and forth, trying to gain ground or trying to defend objectives. Each of these 3 sectors that I have mentioned will be the keys to unlocking the final areas and pushing more on the map in this more linear offensive mode. One or more of these sectors have to be taken before the offensive team attacks forward. If anyone's played a game like Hell Let Loose, they'll know what this kind of game mode works with. It's really fun defending, trying to dig yourself into pitches, MG nests, and terrain in order to defend against the oncoming attackers who most of the time have greater numbers, lives, or so on. And I think this is the perfect way of doing it, really accentuating the fact that you're going to have to push up this horrible terrain, which is what gave the Italians a massive advantage. The bits we've shown from the announcement trailer and the bits of gameplay that have been released, along with some screenshots from the more urban warfare, look absolutely beautiful. This is much more of a step up when it comes to graphical fidelity. Taking much more time looking at the textures, it really is something more. It does feel like a sequel to Verdun and Tannenberg. Those 2 games looked fine, but Verdun came out in 2015, and it does feel a little bit dated now. Not just the graphical fidelity of it, but also the mechanics, the movement. It does feel clunky and a bit janky when you're running about. Hopefully Isonzo can advance upon that, and whilst we haven't been able to play it ourselves in any sort of beta at this point in time, I really hope that they can nail down that movement to keep it flowing like a lot more FPSs do these days. As we see more and more from this map, it is so reminiscent of Battlefield 1 and the map Monte Grappa, fighting in the Italian mountains, fighting through these temporary built-up stone trenches that aren't really dug into the ground, sinkholes and pits where objectives lie, and of course trying to dig tunnels, getting into bunkers in order to defend what you can, using the mountains to your advantage when you're defending, and using the terrain in order to take cover behind as you push up these horrible, death-defying hills. Of course, Monte Grappa is set in this sort of area during World War I, so there's going to be many similarities between the two. However, Isonzo is really focusing on that Italian gameplay. It'll be bringing the Italians versus the Austro-Hungarians, fighting for ground and fighting for land to try and advance their objectives throughout the war. I'm really happy that they've introduced this new offensive game mode. For adding this linear section means that not only can we get all these different types of urban warfare in the game itself, but in the individual matches. If you're fighting in the mountains, trying to climb up to the top of the mountains while the defenders are shooting down, if you complete those objectives, you can then maybe even move on into the trenches and then into the towns, fighting an urban warfare through the streets and in buildings, which is something that we haven't really seen in many games. World War I seems to be a time period that is kind of shied away from. It doesn't have the selling potential as World War II because it's a little bit more difficult to make fun. You see, gamers have been conditioned to love submachine guns, fast-firing weapons, fast-paced gameplay, where it's a one-man army. This has only been pushed forward and reinforced by games like Call of Duty and Battlefield. And even when Battlefield did go to World War I, this much more sparsely used time period when it comes to game genres, they didn't really do it justice. They made an incredibly fun game, don't get me wrong, but in terms of making an authentic World War I experience, Battlefield 1 doesn't really hit it for me. It is great. There's people running around with submachine guns, fast-firing weapons that just feel like a World War II reskin and saying, okay, this is World War I, but let's just bring in a few of these experimental weapons just to make it a little bit more fun for players. Isonzo won't do that. The World War I series leans in on that authenticity, using the bolt-action rifles to say, yes, it's going to be a bit more slow-paced combat, but that is used to our advantage to fix the pacing, to make these bigger battles last for longer, to make it feel like you're really having to make each shot count. If you miss a bullet, you're going to have to reload that gun. You're going to have to pull back the bolt in order to take your next shot, and that could be 2 seconds too late. It leans into that authenticity, which changes the gameplay style and makes it way more unique to something that we've seen in Battlefield or Call of Duty. Now, there's nothing that's been confirmed by the developers at the moment, but from some of the gameplay and teasers and screenshots, it looks like there could be some sort of destructible terrains and environment. We do know that there will be artillery and bombs that can be coming into the game, and also maybe potentially some explosives that can be used by engineers. We do see some ruined buildings when it comes to the urban warfare, but whether they can be destroyed by the players is still yet to be seen. However, in the announcement trailer, we can see a bridge being blown up in order to stop people from crossing it. Could this be an event that happens in games much like Levolutions and Battlefield, or could this just be destructible terrain that can be taken out by players? One of the great things that the World War I series does and has reinforced in all of its games is to keep the battles feeling big, and this is done by adding in AI soldiers, because even though Verdun and Tannenberg don't really have many players on it at the moment, if you want to, you can still have a bit of fun because there are AI moving around, and they are pretty good on the battlefield, and you're able to get a good enjoyable experience in order to bolster the numbers, to increase the size and atmosphere of the game. But let's talk about some of the troops that we'll be able to use. Now, of course, we can see in the screenshot some of the heavily armored infantry. These look like there will be engineers that can be used to cut wires, to move forward, and to open up different paths for the soldiers and foot gunners in order to use. Will these armored soldiers be as big as the tin can knights from Battlefield 1? I very much doubt it, because they're trying to go way more realistic, but they will be more armored, so more durable to bullets anyway. There will also be, of course, snipers that can be used in pinning people down on mountainsides, machine gunners that can entrench themselves in nests, rifle grenades, that is a new thing that we haven't seen in these games before, and of course, mortars, artillery, and air support. These can probably either be manned or called in by a commander or an officer, which I think is more than likely for the air support and artillery. However, we have seen some gameplay from the mortars, which I think you'll be able to use as a player. At this point in time, we don't have a release date for the game, unfortunately. However, it has said that they're going to be bringing it out in 2021, which means hopefully within 4 months, so we don't have too much longer to wait. But please let me know what you think. If you want to go and follow the Isonzo guys, they really release dev blogs, and I'll bring some updates later on in the future on this channel once I've collected a few of them together. But if you want every single dev blog as it comes out, I'm not going to be doing that here, so make sure you go and follow them if that's what you want to do. However, I am not affiliated with them in any way, so I couldn't care less if you want to or not. But what I could care less about is whether you enjoyed this video, so let me know down below. Leave a like on it if you did, and leave a dislike if you didn't, but that will very much make me cry. But subscribe to the channel for more content on Isonzo and any other historical game that I can bring to your faces as soon as possible. But until then, I will see you in the next one.